Alright, hi and welcome back. This is. When am I? Oh, it's a long story. And this is a long story. So, last time we talked, I said I was definitely going to do Koonan this time. Because Koonan's actually pretty fun. I love all of my planets, but they're like my children. I love them all for different reasons. Some of them are problematic and have character defects and flaws, and I really hope that they grow out of them and become better people in the future. But, you still love them for the qualities that they do have and the things that they can do and all that sort of stuff. I don't really have children, I only have fictional planets. Okay, so that being said, Koonan is a lot of fun. So Koonan starts off as a one of the asteroid planets from the Trebek. As a recap, the Trebek was a spaceship that turned itself into a space city, that turned itself into the hamster tunnel, bubble captured asteroids in order to terraform and inhabit them. So, so Koonan is one of those asteroids. Koonan started off as an asteroid that was taken in by Trebek, wrapped in atmosphere, and after being wrapped in atmosphere, they terraformed the surface of Koonan, and then people started living on it. What started happening a lot in a lot of the different asteroids became kind of famous for different things. But Koonan became kind of a safe haven for battered women, for women escaping abuse, neglect, all the kinds of abuse, emotional, everything. Um, and just kind of became a sort of safe haven, just due to the people that were already living there being very sympathetic towards people running from that sort of thing, and uh, and then that just became kind of its personality. The thing that everybody knew Koonan for was that Koonan was a safe place for women escaping situations that were not great. So, that being said, um, as Koonan grew, uh, it became more of an official stance. Sorry. Mm. Using using audio from YouTube. That's what is it? Copyright free music from YouTube. But also, I don't have the no ads, so I'm gonna have to. That was a bit loud. Sorry. Okay, I think that's okay. So, Koonan gets that reputation, but then it starts being like an actual official place for people who want to escape abuse and neglect and all that sort of stuff. Um, so it happens when there's a very large rash of abuse cases that start getting a lot of traction in governments, and somebody decides to just like, oh, we've got to fix this. We've got to make sure people are safe, make sure people have a safe place to escape to, and so that becomes kind of Koonan's place in the Trebek, in the cluster of worlds that is the Trebek. And so they take what was once just their personality just becomes their their official, like, they get extra protections, they get extra kind of border control of who can and can't enter Koonan. And a lot of times, if you want to go to Koonan, you're allowed to go as long as there's not a pending case against you as like you are the perpetrator of some sort of violence. Um, it it becomes a safe haven. officially. And because the major portion of the population are women who have had very bad histories with men, the Koonan population turns out to be mostly female. Um, and it doesn't affect their population the way you think it would. Um, a lot of these women that are escaping abuse situations have children in tow. So there's a lot of children that get raised on Koonan. They have the choice to leave anytime they want, as soon as they're old enough to make that choice on their own. Um, some of them do leave, and some of them come back. Uh, Unfortunately, that's kind of the way of what happens. Um, so, but like their population, though mostly female, doesn't necessarily decrease because of that. Just because there's not many males doesn't mean that there aren't a constant influx of female residents coming in, unfortunately. Um, because that means that just by virtue of being a gal, somebody has decided that it's okay to treat them poorly. And because of that, they run to Koonan. So this culture of being friendly to people who are escaping bad situations turns into a culture of hating the abusers, which is fair. It's pretty darn fair. Um, as they grow, they of course they have to learn, like all of Trebek, all of the asteroids of Trebek, and even the planets that come from the people of Trebek. Every place that they settle, it does have this weird like Wild West house on the Little House on the Prairie kind of vibe to it, because they are in this wild place with resources that they have to find some way to farm. They have to find water. They have to find, like, these things are put on that planet and terraformed onto that planet. But at the same time, just because the resources are there doesn't mean that they're easy to procure and create a life out of. So, so that's a lot of, like like I said, it's very Little House on the Prairie, very um, Old West, very like in the situation of like, yes, they have a lot of technology, and they have the ability to make technology and get it shipped in and all that sort of stuff. But when it comes to the nitty gritty of like, how do we get food, if it's not constantly being shipped in, we have to grow it ourselves. And what does that entail? What technology do we actually need to prioritize? Having the latest touch screen something or other to communicate with the outside world is going to be lower on the priority list than the basic like seeds for crops and like farming equipment and even like farming animals and like just that sort of livestock and ranching and like those sort of tools um, are more in demand than technology. Although they do have their fair share of technology, like I said, it's a strange situation where it's like, yes, they're a little bit like the Wild West, but they also have very quick shipping, so they can get resources quicker, especially since they are basically wow, they are basically an asteroid planet off of the Trebek, so they have a direct line to a very, very like inner city sort of situation. Um, that being said, this is distracting for me, but I'm actually kind of okay with it because I feel like if I'm not focused on something else, I tend to wave my hands around a lot and try to look for some sort of confirmation that somebody's understanding what I'm saying, which is difficult when I'm just, just a gal in a room staring at a computer. But that's the way it is, being this. And that's fine. I'm doing this more for me than anyone. I mean, I love that you're all here. I really do. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you for taking time to watch me or just listen to me ramble. I appreciate it. Thank you. Um, for the most part, I'm trying to keep the story straight in my brain so that I can actually write the darn thing. So, the background story of Koonan, getting back to that. What is this becomes just an all-female planet eventually. Um, it's not that men are completely banned, but there's very, very few that stay if they are children when they come with their moms to Koonan. Very few of them stay after they're adults. Um, and the few that do stay, they're okay with being around a lot of women and just being good and respectful. Because if they weren't, they kind of get kicked off of Koonan. That's kind of the go-to criminal offenses thing is they just get kicked off the planet. And, you know, they're not allowed back because if you can't behave yourself, then we don't want to deal with you. Um, this kind of becomes like all as Koonan grows, all the um, major fields are run by women. All of the farms are run by women. All the productions. Like I said, as things grow, they grow. Technology being what it is and easily to use and access. The government bodies that they decide to elect in are basically all female run bodies of government. Um, because they have a very, very troubled past with men. And so trust of men in general is in short supply. Again, this unfortunately doesn't have much of a detrimental effect on their population because there's no shortage of women that feel abused and oppressed. And so whenever they feel that, they flee to Koonan and restart a whole life. Um, so so Koonan keeps growing this way, and they always have fresh influxes of women from different situations. They do start kind of troubling. They start basically sperm banks at first for women who do want children but don't necessarily want husbands or men in their lives because they've had such a rough history with them. Um, so like wanting to be a mother isn't the same as wanting to be in a relationship or have a husband. Not on Koonan anyway. They're seen as completely different things. And like the culture changes a whole lot from what you'd expect, I guess, from what is normally thought of. Women who are in relationships with the very few men that are on Koonan are constantly checked up on by their neighbors to make sure that everything's going okay. And that's just their reaction because of what they've come from. And they don't really, it's not that they don't talk about their trauma, it's not that they don't work through it, but it's just that some scars, they leave their mark. And it's very hard for these women to trust men, which is why all their bodies of government are run by women, which is why all their like major leaders, even their small town leaders are normally female, and that's just because the population's mostly female, and most females trust other females before they only trust a male. Because they've had a rough history with men. Like over and over again. Honestly, Koonan started off as this idea of like, why do people white women put up with so much garbage when it comes to abusive men in their lives, control, all that craziness. Um, and so like I just invented a whole world of women that were just like, forget it, we're not doing that anymore. We're not going to put up with abuse. We're not going to put up with like control. We're not going to be put up with being being told that we're less than, being made to feel that we're less than. We're going to go make our own planet. Thank you very much. And that's kind of what Koonan kind of turns into, where it's just like they very proudly stay single and stay on their planet and function very, very well. They grow and learn how to adapt in ways so that they don't have to deal with absolutely horrible toxic situations. Um, which, because of their past, they think that that's the only kind of situation that happens between men and women. They all assume that this is this is this is all men. You know, my situation, my like their situation, their circumstance, their experience with men is pretty much what they reference, and they say, okay, well, all guys must be like this because that's how it happened with me, maybe even multiple times before they went to Koonan. And so, because of this underlying kind of like, yeah, it gets kind of man-hating, okay? It does. It comes from a place of hurt. It comes from a place of abuse. It comes from a place of just facing the most awful forms of physical, mental, social, like everything. It comes from all that. But the way they choose to solve it is so over the top. And they just choose to just completely be hermits from men completely. And so the population of men on Koonan steadily goes down. And they don't do anything to rectify it or help with it. Children get adopted in to Koonan, but only female children. Um, there's plenty of women that still migrate in, even with children in tow. But again, the sons of these women, if they do stay, it's rare that they do stay. If they choose to stay, sometimes they have to leave because they decide to act up and hurt somebody. And they have no tolerance for that on Koonan. You're automatically just, you go. You go now. Um, is it fair? Probably not. Okay? But they weren't treated fairly, so why should they treat fairly? They are very petty and very vindictive, and they hold on to that grudge or those pains, those hurts for a very long time, and it becomes almost a cultural identity for a Koonan to hate men. And most of them do, and most of them for pretty good reasons. Um, Again, population keeps growing. Uh, they start doing sperm bank sort of situations where you can't get artificially inseminated. Um, like I said, technology is accessible and high up there. But at the same time, they are slowly coming out of the whole frontier life. They've developed cities and towns and townships, and they're growing. They're growing, and they're getting more industrialized as they grow, which is a whole different thing because their factories are run by women and, you know, populated with women, and the machines are run by women, and everything's run by women. So that has a overall overreaching effect. Yes, productivity and getting the product out and making the money is important, but it's the import of making the product and getting it to the people is more focused on, this will help my community. This will help the people that I know need this. Like, everybody needs clothing. We're going to have a millinery factory, or like a factory making cloths and linens and stuff like that, because I know that's what people need. So, yes, business is run like a business, but is also balanced with the fact that these are the things that people need, and I want to meet that need. So, they have kind of almost a philanthropist heart, but also needing to make money. So, like, so that they can feed themselves and their families and live indoors and all that grand stuff. But at the same time, it's the heart of it is more, I want to help my community, help the other women I see around me. Um, of course, fashion becomes a huge thing. Uh, as they get more and more industrialized, more and more like cities and less like farms, they build cities, they build up economies, they build up um, the industries that hold a lot of sway on Koonan are seemingly like feminine. I mean, their fashion industry is huge. Their skincare, makeup, cosmetic surgery, all of that are huge industries. Everything focused on, because one of the things that Koonan kind of reclaims is being beautiful. Whereas being beautiful when you're from when they were from abusive situations, being beautiful was having a target on your back, because if you're pretty, you're getting attention, and it's not a good kind of attention. Um, but they kind of reclaim that and decide that beautiful is a powerful thing. And so they one of the main precepts of their culture is making everything beautiful, making everything and everyone beautiful. Where also motherhood's highly prized. Like they are known to spend quite a bit of money on beauty, and that's kind of what keeps the industry going, is that they're willing to spend so much. But at the same time, like it's not. I was going to say it's not like unhealthy or toxic, but it can be. And financially, they can probably do with saving more and all that sort of thing. Like they spend like crazy, and I kind of jab at being slaves of fashion and being um, overly obsessed with beauty ideals and just all these different things. But at the same time, they are so extra. It's so fun. They are so amazing. Um, they the buildings they build, they don't have straight edges, and they don't like 90-degree angles and corners. So they find ways of building that makes everything look organic and flowy. Sometimes they build buildings that look like flowers. Sometimes they build buildings that look like rivers that look like they're made out of liquid. They make their buildings, they build everything that they build has this aesthetic look. The colors that they use are bright or beautiful or pastel or just like soft and nice or bright and vibrant, and they like everybody builds in their own fashion sense into their homes and their living spaces, and the way they run their, even when they were running their farms, the way they would plow their fields, and the way they would like everything they insisted on doing, they insisted on making beautiful in some way, because there's a lot of joy to be found in it, and they prize that joy probably a bit more than they would in male dominated world, I guess. And so it's completely worth the money that they spend to make things beautiful, to make themselves beautiful, to make their clothing beautiful, to make their cities beautiful. They do go overboard. They absolutely go overboard. For generations, like different people would get elected into office, and whoever got elected into office would then have complete rights to completely redecorate the entire planet. Like all of the cities in that planet would get an overhaul of like, oh, I want the streets to be aligned with this kind of tree, and Like, I want all the buildings to have this aesthetic or that. And to the point where they actually um, created a kind of building material that does have some, like, they export it enough that it does get involved in other planets architecture and building and different stuff like that, but it is a kind of almost a smart material. It's basically like you can send out a certain amount of like electrical waves, and you can make this material do something different. So the idea is that they can make this material um, shape itself differently. So they don't necessarily have to tear down a whole building and rebuild it. Like, the frame stays the same, but the outside building material, the insulation, all that stuff morphs and changes so that it's like, oh, it was, you know, the architecture looks like Greece, but now it looks like Egypt. Where it's just like the aesthetics of it changed, like a bit different from changing the paint, but like sometimes in crazy ways where it's just like, oh, this building used to look like a giant rose, but now it looks like a droplet of water. And it's just like the main frame of the building inside is the same. The offices, the everything inside of the building is the same. All the living spaces are the same. As far as square footage, they don't lose any of their apartment because somebody changed the outside look. It's just the outside look changes dramatically. So there's this emphasis on outward beauty. Of course, depending on where you are on the planet, there are areas that emphasize more natural beauty. There's areas that emphasize more like, cosmetic surgery isn't looked down on. It's looked on as another means to become beautiful. And so there's whole communities that are like, yeah, plastic surgery, like as soon as you can get it, get it. Kind of feeling like whatever you want to do. You want to make your nose different, you want to make your eyes different, whatever you find is most beautiful for you, do whatever it takes to make yourself that way. Um, Sorry, I had to reposition my legs. But so also like cosmetic makeups, like there's whole communities that just focus on the production and experimentation with beauty products. There's skincare ones. There's sections of every community that has a little bit of everything in them. But there's whole cities that are obsessed with one certain way to be beautiful versus another. So there is definitely communities that focus more on inner beauty and inner strength and what makes you beautiful as a person for your personality, not just your outward looks. Of course, no society is perfect, and you definitely do have cliques and mean girl kind of things that happen where it's just like people bully each other, mostly because they don't feel very great about themselves. But some people aren't very good at being introspective, even among a community of women, supported by women, housed by women. Like, even then, even then, people aren't always happy with who they are, and some people will just take that out on everybody else before they start getting introspective and finding out what's wrong with them on the inside. And so, yeah, you definitely have mean girl cliques all throughout school. Oh, schooling becomes a whole thing. Okay, first of all, being a mom becomes like one of the highest qualities that you can be. Partially because like population is important. The other part is because it's something that's uniquely women, and generally females of any species are the ones that carry children and bring them to to birth. I'm not talking about seahorses, okay? Seahorses are fun all on their own. They can be themselves, that's fine. No shade on the seahorses. Good for you, girlies. If you don't know what I'm talking about, seahorses, the females have harems of men, and um, the men are the ones that carry the babies. So, but I'm not talking about seahorses. I'm talking about human women. And because they are normally the ones that carry children, that's seen as like a very, very high, good quality, like morally good thing to be as a mother. Mothers get a lot of support, they get a lot of helps. Fertility is a huge industry. Um, but like being safe about it, being conscious that it's both the woman and child's health that are constantly being checked on, mental, physical health, and all that sort of thing. Um, the focus is never just on the child, and it's never just on the mother. It's talking about them both as if they are one, uh, and helping mothers that don't let their babies pass, or they miscarry, or or they can't get pregnant, that sort of thing. Those sort of helps, or a lot higher in accessibility, I guess. Their medical care is a very, very high priority on Koonan. Female medical care is because they're all female. They prioritize it because it affects all of them. So, so that being that, what else am I saying? Oh, education. So how education ends up looking like in on Koonan is that once you have your baby, a lot of workplaces will have you actually stay home for the whole first year. You can get an extension for longer, and they will hold your position as far as like if you are the boss. Of course, they have an intern boss, and when you come back, you can still be the boss if you'd like, or you can step down from being a boss and let the boss that was the boss while you're gone be the boss, or the boss that was the boss while you were gone can move to a different department and keep on being a boss. There's a lot of just different like legal stuff that happened that made this kind of like the overarching rule for every business on Koonan. Koonan also, because motherhood is so highly prized, being a stay-at-home mom at first it's very, very like supported and highly prized, but also they do want their children to have more of a society, to have family and friends and a base beyond just their mother. So because of that, they they do have like schools, but their schools are like focused on being a community and a support for the mothers of the children that they care for and the children that they care for. So that you take your kid to school and you talk with the teacher, you introduce yourself to the teacher, and the teacher isn't just their teacher for that year. Um, you'll have two teachers, and one of them will stay in that grade for a year, for 2 years, and the other will move with that group of students up to the next grade and the next grade and the next grade. So you have one moving teacher that is there specifically to help parents and help mothers build community within all the other mothers of all the other children in the classroom and with the children of friend groups within the classroom. And so the focus is on trying to build a group of girls that can work together and play together and learn together, and building that throughout the years where like the whole group ages up to the next grade or the next teacher, and they learn a whole new group of things because each teacher that stays in that age group specializes in that age group. Um, so like since they stay home their first year, you have your 0 to 1 year old is normally you're just you and your mom. 1 to 2, you have two teachers, and one of the teachers is just researched and really smart about what happens at the 1 year old stage, what they're developing, how they're growing, all that sort of thing. They kind of almost become almost also pediatricians, where it's like, especially in the younger groups, well, even as they grow, but um, the younger groups, they focus in on what is exactly happening developmentally with these kids at this age level, what's normal for them, what like just the specificity of like figuring out what to teach at this age. You know what you don't see in psoriasis? Sorry, there's a little light. I didn't mean to do that. Okay, so there's sure, there's an ad. Okay, so there's this overreaching, like there's one teacher that focuses in on that age group and specializes in that age group of what they can learn, what they can teach, what strategies they can use to help each individual child, kind of. And then the second teacher, while also working with the first teacher, the second teacher works with parents and is that bridge between parent and teacher, and also focuses on like being that bridge of like helping these kids get along as a community, because this teacher is building a community, not just building a 1 year classroom situation. It's building a community that will follow into the next grade or the next age group. And there's a lot of mix of kids as far as like um, your 1 year old class will be a certain number of kids and your 2 year old class would be bigger. And you might have 3 teachers, and 2 of them are the ones that are just working the classroom and working that age group and understanding that age group and planning the activities to meet the needs of that age group and the interests of that age group. But also you always have that teacher that follows them through the grades, that ropes in the parents, introduces them to the new teachers, and gets them working like a well-oiled machine of communication, open understanding, like getting that to be a community. And like as the kids grow, each of these situations, like each of these parents have a teacher that they're used to, that they've known since they, like both the teacher has known their kids since they were little, since they were 1, and has known the parents since the kid was 1. And so is, well, like all of the teachers have to have very, very high like EQI, like emotional intelligence quotient, where they understand the parents, they understand where the moms are coming from, what concerns the moms normally have. Like they keep immaculate notes because they have to keep track of each of these kids, each of these parents, and their growth through the ages and stages of their child's life. And in in reference of like there's plenty of times where like you don't get along with one of the teachers, or and hopefully it's not the teacher that's supposed to help you build the community, but if it is, you can at early stages change teachers. Sometimes you grow uh, out of that relationship with that teacher and you have to switch teachers when they're older. um, but like all that is not taken lightly because there's always the kid to consider, as far as like if you're going to change up this teacher that they were expecting to graduate with, you have to consider that. And again, it's not just focused on the best thing for the child, but it's also the best thing for the mother as well. Is always considered. Um, they're considered a unit. Like they have to have a solution that solves both of their problems, both of their issues. But yeah, so schooling is like having a second mom kind of thing. Um, you have your teacher and you kind of have your second mom that's your school mom. Um, of course, like the moms, they work, they come home, they work, they pick up their kids, they come home, they cook dinner, like all the things that you'd see typically. But it's yeah, they're very the schools are more of an inclusive community of parents and teachers rather than shoving parents out the door as soon as they can, or like not building relationships and communities with parents to help them learn how their child learns. There's more of a focus on parents being honored as or mothers being honored as like their child's first teachers. And so like even even in the earliest years of their life, the mothers are still held in very high regard as far as knowing what's best for their child. But at the same time, the teacher is like, okay, but have you considered? And it's a lot of like them bringing their own expertise and knowledge of children and development and all that wonderful stuff to the table as more resources, not talking down to parents, not talking down to mothers about their children, but saying, hey, but there's also this thing that says that, your kid might have like, problems with just absorbing this or understanding that or sensory issues or dietary issues or whatever that the particular problem happens to be or whatever the situation happens to be. I'm not talking down to parents like they don't know what they're talking about, but giving them more resources of like, okay, but there's got to be a reason behind this behavior or that behavior or this situation with this food versus that food and like just different things that come up as a child grows. So, mm, um, so the artificial insemination on a global scale for Koonan becomes more regular, and uh, but with that, the birth rate becomes 50-50 once again of male and female. So a lot of females, depending on their situation, when they have a male child, they have the choice of putting it up for adoption or giving it over to the state and or the planetary government. If they give them over to the planetary government, what tends to happen is either the planetary government will put them up for adoption, but that normally happens after they do a full genetic screening. If the child is male and has a clean bill of health as far as genetic screening, they don't have any genetic defects or any markers for future genetic defects or anything like that. Genetic defects being like situations where like their children will have problems with anything, any sort of gene stuff. If that happens, they start, especially as they've gotten more industrial, they need more of a population, they need more people, and they can't constantly be um, being okay. They cannot constantly be um, putting the burden on sperm banks outside of Koonan. So what they start doing that gets kind of toxic is they make zoos. Now zoos are for like they're more exotic animals and some like petting zoos for like farm type animals and that sort of thing. So they already kind of exist, but they put new exhibits in these zoos specifically for men, specifically for males. And of course they get these male children at very young ages, sometimes as young as newborns. And so they are raised by zoo staff, other women, who, treat them like normal kids, but they're not given much education beyond the basics, beyond just letting them play and kind of learn. And they don't give them any, as they get older, they don't pressure them to learn how to read or write or anything of that sort of nature. Nothing that will, well, they call it um, being detrimental to their happiness. In other words, cluing them into the fact that they are actually being treated like animals. Because, again, some scars run very deep. Some some grudges very long. Some hurts get to the multi-generational level. And some of them become something that they internalize as an entire culture of an entire planet, where they were once treated very poorly, and some of them are still immigrants from situations that treated them very poorly. And so the overall scheme is saying, yeah, we were treated like we were less than, so now we're treating like they are less than. It's not a healthy thing, and it's not a good thing, and I'm not condoning what they do, but they have their reasons. Also, it's bad. Um, like, they treat men like animals. They stick them in a zoo, they raise them in a zoo, they feed them, they clothe them, they let them learn as much as they let them learn. But again, they're not going to give them any sort of resources that's going to cue them into the fact that they are living in a zoo, that one of their walls is plate glass. It's one-sided mirrored glass so that visitors of the zoo can go and gawk at the man's. um, they never see that side of things. They're never told, they're never taught. And they become, because all of them are cherry-picked individuals, that out of the population of women that have, like I said, it's 50-50 birth rate, male to female. Most males are shipped off of the planet completely, but the very few that they cherry pick out that don't have any genetic defects are used to be a sperm bank for the rest of the planet. So you have these children that are born and raised in captivity. Um, and when they get old enough and they've passed all their physical exams, they're used for their sperm. It's not great. It's not pretty. And in fact, as years go by, this becomes a secret. They they know it's ugly. They know that it's wrong. So they keep it a secret from the general population. It gets taught less and less and less where exactly babies come from. To the point where it's like, oh yeah, when you are old enough and you are in a financially stable situation where you can raise a child, you go to the clinic, you get a good health checkup. Once they get a clean bill of health, they'll make an appointment and you will have a baby. You will go to the doctor, you'll take the medicine that you need to take, the way you need to take it, and then in 9 months, like, you will grow a baby within you, and in 9 months you'll have a baby. They don't tell them that the medicine that they're taking and the way that they're taking it is artificial insemination. They're not taught that the other side of the chromosomes that they need to have a baby are coming from men. They don't tell them that. And they say, well, there is a chance that you will have an animal instead of a baby. because men are animals. There's 50-50 chance that your pregnancy will give you an animal instead of a baby. And that's okay. You can always try again when you're ready. But it no longer is a choice whether they want to give up their son. It's an animal after all. And he will either be sold off planet or put in the zoo. And so it's this weird situation for them where you could have a child or you could have an animal. And that's basically what they're taught. It's not great, but it is what it is. And like I said, a lot of these things are very internalized from years of unfair treatments at best and actual abuse at worst. And so all of that. Oof. My feet are going numb. Pardon me. So, that being said. Oh, so Koonan, like I said, Koonan kind of has spending problems. A lot of what they borrow is both money and resources that they borrow from their fellow asteroid planets and even from the Trebek itself. See, even with material that can basically be rewritten into any shape that you want based on the right electrical signal sent into it, it still costs money to build it. To make more of that material. It's basically probably futuristic nanobot sort of stuff, but it's still made out of something. And it wears down and it breaks, and you have to replace it. You have to fix it. You have to find out how to remake it. If it can be remade, if it can be reforged. All of this takes time and money, resources, and that's just on the smallest scale. There's a whole bunch of other infrastructure. They start, because they become so city oriented, they um, are losing out on clean air, and so they start building these giant towers that are farming towers, vertical farming towers, that go almost like to the topmost part of their atmosphere bubble, without touching the atmosphere bubble, without puncturing it. But so they just, and there are oxygen factories, there's whole forests and towers, and there's whole farms and towers, and there's whole like ranches in towers, and they're just, I mean, like skyscrapers, except like all the way into the stratosphere, and floor after floor after floor of different animals, different plants, and each one temperature controlled, and every kind of control that you need to make a certain plant to flourish is accounted for on each floor of these farming towers. So you have tropical sections, you have, like your normal like cornfield sections, you have beans, you have potatoes, you have rice, and each section is temperature controlled, and they're kind of giant towering biospheres, and they, of course, because Koonan, everybody has a different idea of what's aesthetically pleasing as far as how these should be shaped, because they're going to be seen from absolutely everywhere on the planet, or practically everywhere on the planet. And so each of these shapes get funky designs and cute redos and all this sort of stuff, and all of this costs money, all of this costs resources, all of this, not all of it is mined off of Koonan, some of it's imported, and so it's all very expensive. They rack up bills pretty regularly. Yes, I didn't know I could pause this is fascinating. Okay, so at any rate, So, farming towers. Very expensive. Everything is extra. Top of the line. Amazing. Um, they learn how to fix their own things and replace their own things and use their own resources as wisely as they can, all that good stuff, but they still are spending quite a lot. So, there's a industrialist turned president of Koonan who gets nicknamed the Iron Rose. And she is absolutely gorgeous and very smart, very savvy. Girl boss all around, very beautiful. And she goes to each of the other asteroids and she's able to drum up the finances and even go to Trebek and pitch the idea of because they are one of the asteroids of the Trebek, they're actually on one of the farther outer edges. Okay, so a little bit about the Trebek and how kind of awful it is. So you have your middle section of the Trebek, that's the city. And then you have all the planets all around it. But the farther, and they're not just one section deep, they go further and further and further out. They're a cluster of little tiny asteroid planets wrapped in oxygen, connected by tubes to the Trebek and to each other. Okay? That being said, the further out you are from the Trebek, the kind of colder and more intense it is. Seasons on the Trebek are kind of bonkers. Because you're either. So if you're on the sunny side, you have, and your asteroid, you have both the light from the Trebek and the light from the sun. So you have daylight and slightly less light, and then more light once you hit the Trebek side. So your days look more like daylight, twilight, daylight, twilight. Yeah, it's like colder daylight, warmer daylight, and twilight's in between. So, but when you're on the other side of the Trebek, you have your daylight coming from the Trebek. But based on how far away from the Trebek you are, that daylight can get colder and colder and colder. But on the other side, you don't have sunlight. You have the depths of space and the coldness of that. And so your winters on the dark side of the Trebek are absolutely freezing. They are facing the depths of the coldness of space, and then slight warmth and some light from the Trebek. So that being said, Koonan is one of those asteroids. It's on the farther edge. It faces a lot of cold. It either has a very, very warm summer or a very desperately cold winter. That makes their winter fashions just gorgeous, but at the same time very functional of like, okay, would not die today, please. And that's one of the reasons why a lot of women would travel to travel to Koonan in the first place, is because it's kind of rough living, and no one would expect them to run off to such uninhabitable place. It is habitable still, but that was like the original reason why you would run to Trebek, because it was one of the farthest planets at the time, and very few people wanted to go there. And so, if you were desperate enough to get yourself there, the tickets were cheap. So, but through all their ingenuity and all their everything that they've done to the done to the Koonan to make it the thriving metropolis that it is, complete with farming towers, they are more and more needing more protection from the absolute freezing cold. And so the Iron Rose, she convinces the Trebek to give them time, resources, and monies to make essentially a weather control. So they build around the atmosphere bubble a weather machine to keep them warm, to keep them everything going regulated correctly. But the Iron Rose and the rest of the Trebek decide that from the outside it's got to look beautiful too. The inside, they wall like the inside of this weather machine is lined with screens almost, where you can project any kind of sky you want. It is a weather machine. It does actually produce clouds, and that's part of some of the topper layers of the farming towers turn into part of the the weather machines where they can form clouds and they can make rain and all that sort of thing that they need to do in order to keep the planet doing all that it needs to do for life. Um, but also it's kind of lined with screens, so you can just dial up cloudy day, sunny day, beautiful sunset, and everybody on the planet gets to profit from seeing a beautiful sunset, even though it's basically played on a giant screen for them. um, Same thing with dialing up weather, like, oh, we need a rainstorm in this area, like you can control that now. uh, so Koonan decides though that the weather machine from the outside looks ugly, and they don't want anything about their planet looking ugly. So they opt for another machine shell around it that they want to design to look like a giant ball of shiny chrome metal flowers. And but not just like, just so imagine one of those ball bouquets that's just all these flowers, but it's this perfect little sphere and just all these gorgeous flowers. That's what they want Koonan to look like. Not just that. They want each of these beautiful works of art flowers to be made out of the shiniest chrome. And not just that. They want each one to light up a different color, so it can be reflected throughout the leaves of these beautiful giant metal chrome flowers. And so they pitch this gorgeous idea and they get all this money to make this project come true, and they make it come true. It's gorgeous. They light it up and it's beautiful. What they don't tell them is those flowers don't just light up. Those flowers are not just for pretty. Those flowers are engines. They effectively borrowed enough money and time and resources from all the other asteroids and from the Trebek so that they were in so much debt, but they didn't stop. They doubled down. They doubled down and asked for a weather machine. They doubled down and asked for a gorgeous machine shell to put around it. But that gorgeous machine shell was a spaceship, so that they could cut ties with all of the asteroids and with the Trebek itself. And they flew away. They flew away from all of their financial responsibilities. They just pieced out on all of their debts to all the other asteroids. I love them so much. They're so extra. They're so silly. Um, and all they really need is fuel, which they can borrow from any planet. And by this time in the Trebek, all the other planets have been pretty much established. So they can fly to any planet, rack up a debt, get some fuel, and go to the next planet. And do the same thing over and over again. That is their plan. That's how they're gonna deal with their debt, is just not to pay it. Just take off instead. Just peace out. Peace out for that. I'm sorry, but they are just, I love them. This is how I would solve my financial problems. I would just run away. I don't have financial problems. I live in somebody else's home and I eat their food and I pay rent. Yeah. Uh, But yeah, no, if I had financial problems, I'd be like, I don't even want to science this out. I don't want to math this out. I don't want to figure out how much I owe you and how many years it's going to take me to. Nah, I'll just leave. Bye. Um, no, like Koonan's kind of crazy like that. They do end up, they do end up rotating around, becoming a second moon to Rafty for a hot minute. They do end up getting trapped in their magnetic field. Well, not their magnetic field. Getting trapped in their atmosphere. Like they stop being able to just fly wherever they want. They get stuck. Engine repairs. It's a very bad scene. But that is all linked into a whole nother story of how that happens. Is part of Micah's story, so I'm not gonna tell that story right now. But yeah, they fly away from the Trebek in their gorgeous flower encrusted spaceship that they built around their planet. And then they fly off and they go around the closest planet nearby, which is Rafting. And they get stuck there. Yeah. That's kind of it for the planetary history of Koonan. There's a lot of like singular story. Like there's plenty of people from Rafty from well sorry no from Koonan who have relationships with people in Rafty. There's plenty of other things that happen as far as the situation with Micah and how she kind of forces Rafty and Koonan to hang together for a good hot minute. I don't know if they ever break free again. Um, Hopefully, it's a good relationship they form with Rafty because Rafty needs some freaking help, and I think Koonan could force them to be better to women. And yeah, all right. That's all I have. Hopefully next time we can get to I don't know. Shall we try Orthro next? Orthro's kind of boring, but I love it too. It's sweet. Anyways, alright, bye. See you next time.